Hey, Mickey.
Hey, Bob.
Is that another picture of Glenn Youngkin? Wasn't that
Remember
last
this
week?
guy? Remember this guy from
Yeah,
last week?
yeah.
Well, forget about him.
Okay, I almost had. That was almost an awkward moment when I couldn't even remember who that was.
What happened is he was a leading candidate to be the third guy in the race after DeSantis and Trump.
Mm-hmm.
And this past week, DeSantis hired his campaign manager to run DeSantis's super PAC, which is considered a signal that Youngkin is, in fact, not running. I guess you could contrive a scenario where all the candidates fail and there's a draft for Youngkin later in the year, but that's highly implausible. So forget about Youngkin. The guy's name was Jeff Rowe, I believe, who got hired away. Anyway,
meanwhile, DeSantis is floundering.
No, he isn't.
Oh, I'm sorry. I got him mixed up with somebody else.
Why is he floundering? Everybody's saying he's floundering. I see no sign that he's floundering. He's issued a series of a walk back on Ukraine,
on the very thing we discussed last week.
Right.
The phrase I highlighted, territorial dispute, which I was kind of puzzled to see him dismiss it as a mere territorial dispute.
Right.
That phrase indeed came back to haunt him. Here's what he said.
Right.
Here's what he said. If I could snap my fingers, I'd give it back to Ukraine. Ukraine has a right to that territory, and so on.
But he went in the right direction. So he went too far in terms of, poo-pooing the whole war, and he's corrected, and now he's about in the right place. There's some weirdness to it. First, he seems to say that it's a territorial dispute now, but it wasn't territorial dispute at the beginning of the war when Putin tried to take Kyiv and all of Ukraine, which is true. But that begs that raises the question: would he have been forcefully intervening to stop that non-territorial war of aggression early on? He doesn't have to answer that now since it's too late, presumably. But and the answer, I think, is yes. He would have aided Ukraine.
So did he reaffirm that he still considers what's going on now a territorial dispute?
Yes, I think he did. I mean, now he said now what's left to fight about is territory.
That's always what's left to fight about. That's what wars are about.
But it wasn't about the existence of Ukraine as a sovereign state. That he thinks that's been decided militarily.
When you take someone's territory, you are violating their rights as a sovereign state. You are denying their validity as a sovereign state in some sense. Anyway,
there was a very good article in the Atlantic pointing out that when you consider these things under the Wilsonian legalistic framework, which is has it been declared this is a violation of a border recognized internationally, that often screws things up because it obscures the equities in the case, in this case, which is a lot of those places speak Russian. It was Ukraine was part of Russia before. Crimea is an important base. There's no way Russia is giving up Crimea, et cetera. But
it's completely impractical to surrender to that as a general principle. You just have to, if the world is going to be orderly, you have to agree that you recognize something as a sovereign state, it stays that way. By the way, unlike a lot of territorial disputes, some of which trace back to the very beginning, like I think probably India and Pakistan have never agreed about Kashmir, probably. Russia was recognizing Ukraine as a sovereign state 10 years ago.
As this article pointed out, that is because they wanted those people to vote in Ukraine, and they were confident that there would always be a regime in
none of this matters. We can't have a world where borders are respected.
You advocate letting Russia keep some of the territory, so you're advocating this principle that you're so strongly presenting. So don't get mad at me. Get mad at yourself. You're the one that's wimping out on international law.
Now wait. As a practical matter, if you get yourself into a situation where the alternative to letting somebody take territory they've acquired via aggression is a significant threat of nuclear war or something like that, okay. But first of all, That doesn't mean that you have to either A, recognize Russia's right to that, or B, not continue some form of punishment, if only a token form of punishment.
DeSantis didn't recognize Russia's continued, didn't recognize Russia's right to that. He is where you are now, and you're saying he's floundering.
Like if you're right that he's dismissing it as a mere territorial dispute, still he does. But anyway, my point last week was, well, part of my motivating point last week was, is this for real? What is the real DeSantis on foreign policy? And I'm more convinced than ever that there is not one. There is no one. Like so many people who run for president and have been governor, he's given it almost no thought. He has surrendered to all the lobbies you have to surrender to. If you're governor of Florida, then when Obama was president, he criticized Obama's hawkishness because Obama's a Democrat. But so far as we know, there is no real Ron DeSantis when it comes to foreign policy.
Well, it's weird. The New York Times has made strenuous efforts to find a real Ron DeSantis.
Good luck.
But I agree that what troubles me most about it is the way he repeats these phrases that somebody has told him, like Putin is a war criminal or Ukraine is a gas station with nuclear weapons. These little things that he should question if he had an independent mind. Instead, he repeats them. That suggests that he's just a collection of things experts have told him. Just
to be clear, he said Russia is a gas station.
Russia's a gas station with nuclear weapons. Which is crazy. I mean, but he did. It was a little subtler than that. But the point is, I think you're right. But he wound up in the right place, and that's the best you can hope for in a lot of U.S. presidents, right, because American elections are decided on domestic policy, and foreign policy is often an afterthought.
Yeah, but if you are a restrainer in the foreign policy camp, what you're looking for are signs that the candidate actually feels restraint, and they're not just talking the talk and then will blow with whatever political winds prevail once they're in office. All signs are that DeSantis is the latter. It's kind of like Trump. I mean, Trump said he had these convictions, and I think in a way, Trump, in a certain crude, instinctive way, is closer to having them than DeSantis is. But basically, when he got in office, he did whatever the blob told him to do. No? Yeah, no, he said, I want to take troops out of Syria. And they said, no. He said, well, okay. And by the way, U.S. troops got involved in a little dust-up. An American contractor was killed in Syria, where, by the way, we shouldn't be. We're there in violation of international law. We're stealing their oil and giving it to somebody. An American contractor was killed by somebody we said were Iranian proxies. They were Syrians. So we killed a number of them, I gather, with some kind of retaliatory strike. That's actual news. But anyway, back to Trump. Well, then I'm getting out of Afghanistan. No, you're not. And he's like, okay, never mind.
Well, that you're making the case for DeSantis. Trump was ineffectual. He said all the right things, and then he got rolled and didn't work his will on the state. DeSantis' whole pitch is, I will get it done. I will work my will on the state. He's adopted a fairly restraining position, which is, in fact, very, very close to yours and mine.
Oh, got it.
He's kept in check by the base, which believes that, and he will get it done. He's not a guy who get rolled by the bureaucracy. So, any president is going to, Thomas Jefferson bought the Louisiana Purchase, made the Louisiana Purchase, was against all his principles. Any president is going to go against his principles.
Just to be clear, if you look at what DeSantis said across the board, China, Middle East, Europe, Russia, Latin America, he's nowhere near.
I'm talking about Ukraine.
Policy.
I'm talking about in the Ukraine war. He wants to.
That's because he's managed to say virtually nothing.
He wants to support Ukraine, but force them force them to negotiate where maybe they wouldn't want it.
That's fine. That's fine.
Okay. So the major problem of the day, he's fine. That'll do it for me.
Okay.
I mean, your boy Burns is a restrainer, yet he's there fighting the Ukraine war along with Biden. So I don't know whether past history is any prediction of future behavior.
Well, when you're director of the CIA, you do your job.
Well, you don't have to be director of the CIA.
But he hasn't said he's against a settlement. He hasn't said he differs from what you're attributing to me and DeSantis.
We don't know that Tony Blinken is enforcing a settlement behind the scenes.
Well, I think we know that he's not one of the more dovish in the administration.
Did you get that email I sent you? There was a very good article in the Atlantic sort of critiquing the Biden administration's policy on Ukraine by some guy who's, I think, Mario Loyola. Is that the guy's name?
Don't know.
At the University of Florida and or some Florida university. And it brought up another instance where he claimed that the U.S. sabotaged a possible peace in Ukraine when Europe tried to enforce the Minsk Accords and reduce it to, in fact, a territorial dispute. And
so
the U.S. said, we're not at 2021. What he said.
Okay.
He said it was 2020.
There were much earlier.
Well, he found a later one.
Yeah. No, Minsk was the big opportunity. A lot of people think the Minsk Accord, the Minsk II, and it was a reasonable deal. Would have been tremendously preferable to this. Some people claim Russia wasn't really up for it. I don't know. I don't think we were willing to find out.
Anyway, he also makes the point about the rule of law obscuring the equities and not really solving the problem, precisely because it obscures the equities.
Oh, well, then that's not a good piece. What obscures what fucking equities?
Well, read it first.
I mean, the problem with the rule of law is that the U.S. does not enforce it consistently. It hypocritically violates it all the time.
The equity is that the Donbass a lot of it wants to be Russian, or at least is ethnic Russian, and
fine, but
the border that was drawn ignored that. Just the same way a lot of borders that are drawn by international bodies, including the one in Iraq,
right? But surely you agree
equities on the ground.
There are a billion cases like that. Surely you agree,
right?
They have to be settled through diplomacy and mutual agreement, and can't just be casually handled with the use of force the way Russia did. Surely you agree.
I think it should be handled through diplomacy, but the fact that one side says, "Oh, the rule of law says you lose, screw you," doesn't help the negotiations.
Well, it would if we abided by the rule of law. This is my big criticism: is we're completely hypocritical, and we're in no position to tell anybody what to do.
Well, I'm talking about Ukraine versus Russia. The rule of law obscures their bilateral negotiations. That's nothing to do with whether we are hypocritical.
Ukraine has every legal right to say, sorry, we're not budging if they want to, as a legal matter.
Well, then you're not going to have much success with diplomatic negotiations, are you?
Well, that you could run into trouble. I'm just saying, I support the rule of law. I don't support the U.S. approach.
Crimea. It's insane to think that Ukraine is going to get Crimea. Yet the rule of law says Ukraine gets Crimea. Well, maybe we shouldn't base our entire foreign policy on the rule of law.
Well, Mickey, you used to worry about immigrants demanding that California return California to Mexico. You genuinely worried about that 20 years ago. Well, it used to belong to Mexico, and there would be a lot of people of that ethnicity there. Why not? What right do you have to deny it to them? It used to belong to Mexico.
You're saying that the treaties that ended the war, I'm arguing to defend the rule of law. Well, I'm saying that we have it. Come take it, buddy.
But you would understand if they blew up, if terrorists blew up your house as part of a separatist movement, you would understand those are the equities on the other side of the rule of law argument.
I would say the equities are mainly on my side, but I'm not against the law. I'm just saying it has these that apply, especially applying it to foreign policy has these
this is what I was saying last week.
Implications.
This is what I was saying last week. This is the difference between me and a right-wing restrainer. Exactly this. Exactly this. On the right, there is very little respect for the actual rule of law, even if enforced non-hypocritically. In the far right, Trump,
DeSantis did not. You said DeSantis evinced that disdain, and he doesn't. If you read the Piers Morgan interview,
well, again,
full of saying that Ukraine has the right to this and the right to that and the right to this.
Well, again, DeSantis, there is no DeSantis on foreign policy.
I mean, if all of southern United States and southern Arizona and southern California were filled with Mexicans who wanted to be part of Mexico, I would say that would be a different situation than the situation that prevails now. And
well, that's what you thought was going to happen. You're ready to surrender the homestead. Good, that's commendable. Your commitment to equity is commendable, and I think
that's not what happened.
Job as a DIE guy at some company.
That's not what happened.
What?
Well, since it's Stanford, it turns out Stanford has 10,000 administrators. It seems like my chances are good.
Mickey, I have to make a confession. Last week I made
DEI, not DIE.
It's DEI. What's DIE? Driving. Die. Last week I made a factual error. And of course, we always, note those moments with a moment of silence, which we'll do. But I want to credit the first person to call my attention to it, of several. There are people paying attention to this podcast. James Scythe said, love the non-zero with Mickey, but Princeton was a 13 seed when it upset number 4 seed UCLA in 1996. I had said it was a 16 seed upsetting a top-seeded UCLA. Part of my excuse is that UCLA was the defending national championship when Princeton beat it in 1996. But the other thing I want to say, Mickey, as long as we're on the subject, is last week I confidently predicted that Princeton would beat Missouri in the second round of the NCAAs. The day after our podcast, they did. Tonight they face Creighton. And first of all, I want to say, you can if you look up in the Princeton cheering section, you can tell the serious Princeton fans from the hardcore Princetonians by whether they're wearing a mere Princeton shirt or a Hoagie Haven shirt. I saw one of these last week in the cheering section. And this is what you want to look for, Hoagie Haven.
And that separates you from mere traditionalists?
Well, separates me from a lot of people, but including, tourists who buy shirts at the used store or something. But anyway, I'm just saying you may see this very shirt if you look closely on TV. Finally, trivia question. So they're playing Creighton. Again, the underdog. I'm predicting Princeton victory in slightly less cocky fashion this time. But trivia question. Name the former coach of Creighton who died this week.
Willis Reed?
Correct. I'm surprised. I thought I was going to have to give you a little hint. But correct. He was head of Creighton for 4 years. The great and inspirational New York Knicks center.
He was an inspiration.
In a famous moment in 1970 or so.
Right.
So
Bill Bradley was on that team, right?
He was on that team. And he was on the last Princeton team that made it to the Final Four in 1965. And he outscored, he was matched up against Cassie Russell of Michigan, who later became an NBA great. And he outscored him by like 42 to 20 something.
Unfortunately, he was the only guy on the team who scored.
Well, exactly. I mean, he fouled out with like 4 minutes to go and they were like 12 points up or something. Princeton was. It was some big lead with not many minutes left. Bradley fouls out and they collapse. Sad.
What can I say? I'm sorry I'm missing the March Madness. It's a great institution. Is Farley Dickinson still in it?
No, I think they lost. Another great New Jersey institution now. We call it Fairleigh Dickinson here in.
Okay, those guys.
Yeah. So I want to get back to Ukraine eventually, but what else? This the Trump indictment.
We got Ukraine, the Trump indictment, DeSantis, and some Silicon Valley Bank, follow up, and was the Iraq War worth it? Follow up. But the last one is going to go to the Parrot Room. That's
just you trolling me, right? On Iraq. Like
No.
saying wasn't it worth it? That's just a troll.
No, I had one point to make, which was that point. Yes.
Just the ritual Bob troll on Iraq. Yes.
Well, okay, let's get it out of the way now. All I'm saying is Iraq is a moderately better place now, I think, than it would have been if we hadn't intervened at a tremendous cost in life. Okay, and the U.S. reputation and Americans' faith in government and our foreign relations. Okay, was it worth it? I think it's I think not, but it's hard to say for sure. It's harder to say for sure than if Iraq was clearly a worse place, and we could say for sure the war wasn't worth it. Now you can argue either side, and as time goes on, if Iraq continues as even a close to a democracy, and the economy somehow picks up, that it'll look better and better in retrospect. And one day before he dies, George W. Bush will crow that it was the right thing to do.
He probably is crowing that now. John Bolton was crowing it this morning.
Who?
John Bolton.
Oh, no, Bush is very apologetic in his memoirs, I think.
Oh, is he?
Yeah.
Oh, good for him.
Maybe not for he says he was sick mainly about the WMDs, but I don't know what he says about the overall worth of the war.
That is such bullshit. Do you realize the UN inspectors, they had to kick the UN inspectors out of Iraq to invade. They had inspected more than 500 sites. And the key thing is, first of all, Iraq had let them inspect every site. They're sitting there being allowed to inspect everywhere they want. And we kicked them out so we can invade and look for WMDs. And if you ask, well, which sites had they inspected? They had inspected all the sites that our intelligence agencies told us the WMDs were at. So we knew that our intelligence wasn't worth shit because we had checked it. And still they went in. There's no...
They weren't denied access. They weren't denied access to certain places?
Not one fucking place. And don't listen to anybody who says otherwise because it's bullshit.
What about under Bill Clinton? There was some fuss about not being let into various
facilities. They didn't let the inspectors in until, the Bush administration, at least this round of inspectors.
Yeah. Huh.
So...
I defer to your expertise on that.
Thank you. I assume you agree that we should be very wary of indicting Trump. I don't think we're going to have a big argument on this.
At this point, because Trump has gone so overboard, showing this picture of him with a baseball bat, saying that there'll be death and destruction.
Lock him up?
If he's indicted.
Lock him up?
No, I just think if he doesn't indict, Trump will get a huge bonus. He'll look like this strong guy who he picks up a baseball bat and they don't dare indict him. He's such a strong guy. Okay. That's going to help him win the nomination. And if he wins the nomination, there's a threat he'll win the presidency. So at this point, I think you got to indict him just to deny him that victory of show of strength. Then you can let a judge dismiss it because it's a crap case or have it peter out, but don't have Trump thwarted off with a baseball bat.
Sounds like you're not totally averse to the idea of political calculations playing a role in the decision about whether to indict.
No, of course not at this point.
I guess I'm not either in a certain sense because I'm leery of the political implication. Look, I do think as a rule, and not all countries have this tradition, but I think as a rule, you should err on the conservative side in deciding whether to indict not so much just a former president, but somebody who is still a political actor and may run for office again. And now to come to the present day political calculations, I would say, especially when a third of the country is convinced, however crazily, that he was illicitly denied the election last time around, and various other things like the current state of the country.
If the charges were clear and the violation of law was clear, I would say go ahead. But the charges are insane.
Well, I wouldn't go that far.
You have to prove that he made this hush money to further his campaign, not to avoid embarrassment or hide it from his wife. Okay, hard to prove.
Well, not only that,
beyond a reasonable doubt, you're not going to prove that. They couldn't prove it against John Edwards, where it was a much stronger case, I think, or at least mildly stronger case. So it's it's a loser. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. No, because it's only a misdemeanor unless it was for campaign purposes.
I mean,
in which case they argue that it was implicitly a donation to the campaign that should have been reported. I mean, it's just pretty weak.
You should forget about Trump being put in jail. Okay, the strongest case, everybody says, is the documents, the fucking documents, which is a trivial case involving the archives. Okay, I mean, forget it. That's not a strong case either. So, well, they're all weak. Okay,
it's possible
ain't gonna happen.
It's possible that there's more information about that I haven't heard that would lead me to say it's actually serious. But right now, given the fact that Biden turned out to have documents all over the place, it looks pretty weird to indict Trump, unless there is a whole lot more we don't know about what he was doing with those documents and why he had them and so on. And then there's also a potential indictment on the January 6th stuff. And that's
everybody's saying the strongest is the documents. So that implies that the January 6th stuff and the Georgia stuff are weaker.
Well, I do think if it's a case of incitement on January 6th, I'm told, I gathered from somewhere, that as a matter of law, that's very weak. I mean, I do think as we use the term incite, he incited, and I think that moment with the Pence tweet after the Capitol had already been breached was in some sense criminal, but as a matter of the way criminal law actually reads, no, it's apparently weak. And I didn't even know what the Georgia stuff is.
Can you give me the phone call?
Oh, that perfect phone call. Okay. Well, that was pretty. I don't know what the law says, but that was. I would consider that grounds for impeachment. But it's weird how, in some ways, the bar for impeachment can be lower than the bar for felony indictment.
Well, I don't think it is. I think that's close to being a felony indictment. He made it clear that he thought these were the number of votes that he deserved under law.
Wait, you think it is the grounds for felony indictment?
I don't think it is a grounds for felony indictment.
I'm not saying it is.
Unless they know more than we know.
No, I'm not saying it is. I'm saying
I think he was, if he goes around to the states strong-arming them, you could say that that's impeachable, because being impeachable doesn't have to be a crime.
That's my point.
Yeah. But anyway, we don't really, we don't even know for sure that he wanted a riot. He wanted Pence to delay the vote. That's clear. But did he want them to breach the Capitol? I don't think we know yet.
Well, at that moment, he was at a minimum recklessly endangering Pence's life so far as he knew, given what he knew.
Yeah, well, that's again impeachable. But
and Pence, by the way, was the vice president. So
you're saying that's the incitement. The incitement is Mike Pence, not the speech at the mall.
To me, that is the most impeachable thing he did that day,
well,
and it is impeachable.
Yeah, that's the strongest criminal case too, because what he said at the mall, you read it on its face.
No, it's not indictment. It's not incitement under the law. I agree.
And he doesn't even seem to think that it is going to produce a riot or violence. I mean, he wanted to go there himself. Why would he want to go there himself in the middle of a riot?
I don't know, but I'll tell you something I'm pretty confident of. When he watched on TV and these guys were swarming the Capitol and the police couldn't control him, he was in heaven. Believe me.
Oh, sure. I don't like Trump. I mean, we're just talking criminal charges.
You had a funny way of showing it.
So, what was this a diversion from? You wanted to get back to Iraq?
Ukraine.
Ukraine, sorry.
But if there are other things you want to do first.
Well, I have 2 points about DeSantis.
Oh, okay.
Do I have 2 points? I have 2 points about DeSantis. One is he has a reputation as a can-do governor, in part because he runs a tight ship in Florida, doesn't tolerate leaks, appoints his people to various positions of power.
Mm-hmm.
So he runs the state the way a governor is supposed to run the state. He can't do that in the federal government because you only have 5,000 or so appointees and a workforce of 500,000 about, and maybe it's more than that. But you don't have enough appointees to go around. You can't control the government. The rest are civil service. The deep state flourishes behind civil service protections. Things don't get done because the bureaucracy resists you and you can't control the bureaucracy, okay? The way he can in Florida. So his can-do thing is facing a big problem if he actually becomes president. Trump also had this problem. Part of the problem was Trump just not knowing what to do and being, feckless and willing to substitute words for actions. But even when he tried to take actions, he was frustrated. And his solution is this thing called Schedule F. He wants to create a new schedule in the federal government for policy-making positions where he gets to appoint them and gets to fire them basically at will. That's actually a good idea. It's an old Washington Monthly idea. Trump wants to do 50,000 of these. That's the estimate that's floating around, as opposed to 5,000. That is maybe a few too many. So some place between 5 and 50 is probably about right for now. We can always increase it later, but that's not a bad plan. It's going to the establishment is going to rise up as one to protest it because they know what Trump will do with it. But 20,000 appointees, you elect a president, that seems quite reasonable. It requires overturning the world's worst Supreme Court decision, Elrod versus Burns, which says you can't fire somebody just because they disagree with your policy, because that's a violation of their First Amendment rights. Totally insane. But that can be done. So DeSantis has endorsed the Trump plan. So that's the way he gets around. He knows that he's not going to be able to control the government, but the idea that he's going to actually achieve Schedule F is probably pretty far-fetched.
So they agree on this.
They agree on this, yes, and DeSantis knows he has a problem. He can't run the United States the way he runs Florida. But I don't think he's going to be able to surmount that.
So I lapsed for a second. These are jobs that now. Is it that you appoint them and can fire them, or that they are to begin with civil service jobs, but you can fire them, or what? It
is right now. They're civil service jobs. You can fill them, but you can't fire them once they're in. Except for you got 5,000 jobs in the plum list, I think it's called, that are basically political appointees, and they sort of quit they quit with the changeover of administrations. There is this crazy Supreme Court case hovering in the background that says maybe if it looks like an ordinary non-civil service job, you still can't fire them. Okay, the Trump plan would let you do two things. One, you can move existing civil servants into this Schedule F where you can fire them. So everybody in the civil service is at threat to being moved into this fireable position. And the second, once he appoints them, he can fire them, or she can fire them.
I think I'm against this. So wait, Trump could pick 50,000 civil servants and fire them? He could just move them into if he wants to fire them, he just moves them into these positions and fires them?
Correct.
God. I mean,
50,000 is too much, but he has to be able to control. He's elected president. He should be able to control the things the president's supposed to be able to control.
What's an example?
And there is a
what's an example of an actual policy thing where the president wants to do something and he just can't do it because it's civil servants? What could Trump have done?
There are a whole lot of people below the secretary level at the Department of Homeland Security that resisted his border policies. He should have been able to replace them.
Like what? The assistant
secretary, the assistant secretary level is where the rubber meets the road in terms of
what policy did he want executed if they just said, sorry, not going to do it?
Oh, there are a lot of them. I mean, he wanted to. He was desperate to change the rate at which the hearing officers find that migrants who show up illegally meet the initial bar for seeking asylum. I think it's credible fear.
Mm-hmm.
It was 70%. he was desperate to get it to at least 50%. So only half of them got in. Okay, and he couldn't do that. There was a constant fight about the refugee levels. The border wall he faced resistance to. From the the border patrol, wanted their wall. They like walls that needs a lot of border patrol people to man it. He's got to be able to replace the top people of the border patrol, not just the head, but enough people under the head so that he reaches his tentacles deep down into the bureaucracy. I'm a defender of the Charlie Peters 50-50 plan, which says half of the civil service should be political going forward. Grandfather all the people over there, but every new appointee, one for the civil service, one for the political spoil system.
I'd like to hear if Charlie's sticking with that plan now that he's imagining a Trump in the White House. But
keep in mind, everybody's grandfather. So the deep state's got a while to run.
So we talk a little. I wish I knew more about the examples you cited. I've got a feeling that I might be able to argue somewhat successfully, but I don't. So you win, I guess, for the time being. So on Ukraine, so what's going on? So first of all, Bakhmut, I've been talking about all the second guessing of the decision to try to hold it rather than retreat to the nearby higher ground. Second guessing continues, and it has reached such prominence that even mainstream media is covering it. And the Wall Street Journal had a piece where the head of Ukraine's land forces was defending the decision.
I thought the CW was shifting. Now it looks like, the Wagner Group guy is focusing on Africa, having failed in Bakhmut. The Russians are sending ancient 1940s era battle tanks because they've run out of tanks. Ukraine is readying its spring offensive because the Russians have been so weakened around Bakhmut they can attack elsewhere. I sense the shift in the ties, but maybe I don't read as much as you do.
I don't think really insiders are relaxing their criticisms. I'll give you an example. There was an exchange yesterday where there's a guy, what's his name? Tatarigami. He identifies on Twitter as a Ukrainian reservist. I think that's accurate. I've been following him for some time. Clearly pro-Ukraine, but not uncritical. Very smart. And he's arguing with some guy. There is a guy defending the policy, but the guy who's defending the policy is a total clown. I've followed him too. He's a total fucking clown. So he's strangely, he's got a position at St. Andrews in war studies or something, but he's just always struck me as, well, whatever. Anyway, so this guy, this Ukrainian reservist officer says sarcastically, yes, the perfect strategy, keep your forces trapped in an operative encirclement, meaning a de facto encirclement, even though it's technically incomplete. And then he says, okay, so trapped in an operative encirclement, continue losing doctors and experienced troops attempting to enter or leave a city located in lowlands, and then use reserves intended for a different offensive to break encirclement so you can be. And then I think I failed to, I'll click this. I failed to copy the second tweet, but then I think he says so that then you can, triumphantly hang on to the city, at this huge cost, and then, declare yourself a hero. But no, I think they're paying a big cost. And look, it may be that the Russians are becoming exhausted. They are not, they are making inroads. I mean, they continue to, the territory only shifts basically in one direction for the most part around Bakhmut, at least so far. The Russians now occupy 2/3 of the city itself. And so I wouldn't say it's looking great for Ukraine. Yeah.
If you were Russia, wouldn't you throw your expendable troops at it and keep your best troops for the offensive in other areas?
Well, they threw a lot of the expendables, the former prisoners.
Yeah. Right. They're still throwing them, I think, aren't they?
Yeah. I mean, but one reason I still question the decision to keep trading Ukrainian lives for these prisoners is not just that Russia considers them expendable, it's that they are on 6-month contracts, and then they can do whatever they want. And a lot of them are like, the big recruiting was about 5.5 months ago. These guys are not going to stick around and be in your way when you do your offensive. They're about to go back to Russia. Let them go back to Russia and continue to rob houses and stores, let them return to their lives of crime. I don't know. The other thing is that there's this city
You're
called...
saying in the middle of battle, go ahead with your point.
No, I'm just saying, some guys, if you don't kill them, they're going to haunt you for 6 months, a year. These guys, you don't kill them, they're going to haunt you for about another 10 days, and then they're going to leave because their contracts expire.
In the middle of the battle, they're going to say, "Okay, sorry, my contract's up. See you later. I'm heading for Moscow."
If I were them, I'd be keeping track of the 6 months. Yes.
Oh, I'm sure they are, but
it was a deal.
You have an officer behind them with a gun trained on them. I think they might.
No, I think the Russians honor the deal. It's 6 months. But anyway,
the rule of law strikes again.
The argument is you're losing all these guys who could have been used in the offensive. You're probably, this town of Avdiivka, non-trivial significance, is being encircled and probably wouldn't be if you hadn't diverted resources from it. It's not a huge thing. I'm just saying this continues to be a criticism. Now, an interesting thing is, the Douglas McGregor thesis is maybe tested sooner than we thought. That thesis, his claim is, if you ask him, well, why didn't Russia do as much on this offensive as soon as you predicted? He says, well, the winter was not a true winter. The ground didn't stay frozen for long, so they couldn't make the advances. But wait, after the muddy season is over, you wait. You'll see. Well, the muddy season may not last as long as it usually does. It was a low precipitation winter. I just thought the last week was drier than usual. So it may just be a few weeks before we see whether McGregor's right or not. And if you don't, once it dries out, if you don't see big Russian advances, I guess that means he was wrong. And then the question is whether Ukraine will, is in position to do the offensive earlier than anticipated if it does get drier sooner than people thought.
There was also this basically long distance debate between DeSantis and Zelensky. Zelensky tried to counteract the DeSantis claim that it was just a territorial dispute. And I thought I didn't think his argument was all that strong. It was the old, if I heard it right, it was the old, we are fighting him here, so you don't have to fight him there argument, which I've never, nobody in America has bought for a long time, I don't think.
Actually, Adam Schiff said that exact thing. But it is crazy, of course. Yeah.
I mean, Putin has shown that he's not as much of a threat as we had thought. He's not about to land in Florida with his 1940s era tanks and his and the Wagner group. So he's less of a threat even to his neighbors. I do buy the argument that if he had taken Ukraine easily the way he thought he was going to take, he might have been emboldened to go after some other countries in the area. But that's also not a threat to us, and now we know different.
Yeah,
so
I don't think so. But
all the forces are arrayed in favor of a negotiated settlement in which Ukraine gives up some territory and in exchange for some sort of security guarantee.
I mean, we'll see.
And the rule of law is violated, and you swallow hard and eat it.
Yeah, well, I mean, we'll see what happens with this offensive, which, again, I'm not that optimistic about. But I don't know. Europe, I guess this is significant, pledged 1 million artillery shells over the next year for Ukraine. That's about the rate of total artillery shell expenditure of last year for Ukraine. And America's making 20,000 a month, and I assume America's going to dip into its stockpiles in preparation for the offensive. So, you never know what. One thing I've wondered is, like, are they saving some surprise weapon for the offensive? Because these weapons, when they introduce a new weapon like the HIMARS, eventually the Russians adjust, and then they're not so powerful. But you have success for a while. And I'm wondering if there's something we don't know about, maybe the long-awaited switchblade drones. Although apparently, I mean, it could be they're having some effect now, because it turns out the U.S. Refuses to let video from them be released or video of them be released. So they could be doing some damage we don't know about. But yeah.
Do they have it? You know, whenever we fight a war, we have all these high fancy weapons, and the weapon that actually is used and effective is the old A-10 Warthog, which we've now discontinued production of. Isn't there a way to get Warthogs in the hands of the Ukrainians? No, they're slow. They're slow, but they go along the battle line and kill enemy troops. I mean, you know,
I don't know about the Warthog situation. I mean, you know, traditional air power hasn't been all that meaningful, I think. You know, it's been much more about drones, and both sides have been reluctant to use their planes aggressively because they keep getting shot down, I think.
Yeah. Okay. You would have thought that the Warthog would have, you know, gone out of business.
Is this a Rick Hertzberg? Is this a Rick Hertzberg talking point? Warthogs?
I can't hear what you're saying because my earplugs fell out.
Okay, well, I'll just continue to.
Give me a second.
I was saying, is this a Rick Hertzberg talking point? I remember Rick talking about warthogs in a New Republic editorial meeting.
It's sort of a, you know, it's a Jim Fallows. It's anybody.
I see. Yeah.
It's a Jim Fallows. Anybody who's followed the war talking point, and it's the classic case where maybe it's now finally obsolete, but it's the classic case of a weapon the Pentagon wanted to kill so it could focus on the ultra expensive, high tech, cost overrun weapons that didn't work. Okay, and the Marines and the Army people who had actually fought in the war said, "No, we want the Warthog." Okay, you know, it's hard to shoot down. It's heavily armored. Yeah. But I imagine a missile could shoot it down.
Oh yeah, Britain is giving Ukraine depleted uranium ammo, and that caused a little bit of a Putin and Medvedev were talking as if that's ground for launching a nuclear weapon, but it's kind of not a very close comparison. I mean, there are questions about whether depleted uranium is a health hazard to troops who handle it and civilians after the war, but it isn't. It isn't like a nuclear weapon.
Yeah, I have one more DeSantis point. How long have we been going?
The alarm just went off, which means you're supposed to be wrapping it up. But hit us. Go ahead.
It's become clear to me. I like DeSantis. I think he needs some fine tuning. I don't think putting points on the board, which is how he describes his style of government, isn't the vision of a driving dream that you need to run for president. It's the vision of a very effective governor who puts points on the board, and an ex-athletic coach. But you need something more than that, I think. He has to describe what sort of society he wants and how he's going to achieve it. But that's not a problem. The problem is his voice. People are annoyed by his voice. If he had a different voice, he'd be, you know, he'd be elected president by acclamation.
Doesn't he have like an earthy, you know, kind of regular guy's voice?
No, he has a whiny voice.
No, I have a whiny voice, and I don't sound anything like him.
He makes you sound like Jeffrey Holder.
That's bullshit. No, he sounds much more.
No,
he sounds much more earthly and manly than me.
He has a nasal. He is more earthly and manly.
I am more nasal than him.
No way.
Oh, come on.
¿Quién es más nasal? You are less nasal.
Yo soy más. We pronounce it nasal in Espanol.
Everybody says this. The man on the street says it. The political honchos say it. I keep wondering.
They say, wait.
Isn't there some secret sinus surgery he could have, or some voice training to like lower his voice or to get rid of that nasal overtone? Whether it's like you or not.
Yeah.
You know, maybe you're annoying too, Bob. Maybe you should have the surgery.
This is the first time this is occurring to you?
I don't think of you as a nasal person. I think of him as a nasal person.
Well, then why am I not a big broadcasting star? I thought this is what was holding me back. I thought this was the only thing that was holding me back. That and you. Those two things. Those are the only two things I thought were holding me back.
Yeah. I think it's the man bun. You have a man bun these days?
A little bit.
Yeah. Okay. Boomers should not have man buns.
But I was getting no traction long before I had a man bun, so that
Okay.
that explanation doesn't work.
Anyway, I just think something as crude as that, there should be a fix to it. I mean, Abraham Lincoln, do I have a beard? Do I not have a beard? Do I wear a top hat? He went through exquisite calculations as to what would appeal to the population. And DeSantis is allowed. He's allowed. He changed the pronunciation of his name.
Exactly.
He's allowed. He used to be DeSantis. He's allowed to make changes.
Apparently, pretty recently, he was saying DeSantis, right?
He's allowed to have Botox. He's allowed to dye his hair blonde. This is
Why
America.
Did he change the way he pronounced his name?
Be what you want to be.
DeSantis sounds Southern. What's wrong with that? Hi, I'm Ron DeSantis.
It sounded affected to me, but maybe it's just because I'm used to the DeSantis part. Well, he's running in the North, so he has to appeal to Northern Italians and Catholics, and et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, all these cheap considerations he should be allowed to make, and I just think he maybe underestimates the extent to which people are annoyed by his voice.
I've got a feeling Trump may eventually mention this name change thing. If he has,
his minions are already mentioning it.
Yeah,
his blogging, his army of influencers who may or may not be paid.
So I don't know. It seems like I had more I wanted to say. It's kind of like life, you get to start approaching the
on Ukraine.
No, yeah, but I don't think there haven't been big developments. It's on balance moving in Russia's direction, but very, very slowly. Nothing to brag about yet.
This guy Loyola, if I have his name right, says two things. He says we're giving military aid without a strategy in a way that is designed to cause a long-term stalemate, keep the war going forever. It's basically the Vietnam stalemate machine. We don't let them attack Russia. We don't let them to do the things that might actually win or lose. We let them avoid losing. Now, avoiding losing is a victory for Ukraine, but still, it means it goes on for a long time. The other thing is he's worried that Russia will just declare a ceasefire and say, okay, we're declaring a ceasefire where we are. We're taking the territory we have. Do you want a ceasefire or do you want to keep the war going?
Yeah.
And that puts us in a bind.
I mean, I'll know Ron DeSantis is on my foreign policy team when he starts talking about the various unwise things we did that made this war much more likely. And had we not been doing them for a couple of decades, there probably wouldn't be a war right now. That's when I'll start singing his praises.
Bob, elections are about the future.
You're right. That's coming from your end. Is that Siri?
Why has Alexa responded? Alexa, stop.
That's Alexa.
What did I say? Did I say her name? I didn't say her
name. Future. I don't know.
She who cannot be named.
So, Mickey, if people have not had enough of us, and some have, and that's perfectly understandable, but they probably checked out a long time ago.
They haven't because they can't find us. I try to describe people how to find this free podcast, and I give up in despair. It's the Wright Show on Blogging Heads. No, Nonzero.
Name of the podcast is Nonzero. Nonzero.
Right.
Search Nonzero on your podcast app. It's not as complicated as you're making it sound.
And then what do they look for?
It's on that feed. It's on that.
It's one of the many podcasts on that feed.
It's one of 2 a week.
Okay.
It's 50% of the podcasts on that on the public feed, on the public Nonzero feed.
I'll try that.
Do. Now anyway, then on the other, there's also the Parrot Room, which is only on the special person's feed. You can find us at patreon.com/Parrot Room. What are we going to talk about this week, Mickey? Did you see Everything Everywhere All at Once?
I did.
Good. We'll talk about that. I have a lot to say about that. That speaks to me, man. And I have a prediction about whether it spoke to you, but we'll get to that in the Parrot Room.
Okay. We both saw that movie. The last half hour was.
That was part of my prediction, so I got that right. Okay.
akin to Guantanamo level torture.
I was going to
There's
predict that.
Silicon Valley Bank. There's a few more points to make about that.
Mm-hmm.
The banking system is not out of the woods. Systemic problems have been revealed. Should we abandon the word woke? There is a lively debate about that, or a one-sided debate about that anyway. There's the Biden veto of the ESG rules, which is environment, something, and governance. And it's a proposed change to the fiduciary laws governing pensions, and the Congress, with the help of Democrats, bipartisan vote, decided to throw out these rules, and Biden vetoed it, so the rules win. I think that reveals a systemic flaw in the government. And the demise of the Camaro.
The car?
The car is, well,
don't leave it in the log room.
Okay. It's going out of production. I can say that.
That's what we call a plot spoiler in the Parrot Room business.
There's
that's sad. Well, I'll talk about that.
Well, there's more to it. There's more to the story than that.
Okay.
It's like everything everywhere all at once. It's just when you think it's dying, it's got another half hour to run.
Ooh, suspense. Well done.
There's
Lab
life on asteroids.
Life on asteroids.
I think I have to ask you.
You mean asteroids, not steroids? Asteroids.
Asteroids have been discovered to have the building blocks of DNA on them, which, to my mind, supports the panspermia thesis, which you talked about in your book.
Directed panspermia.
But I may be wrong.
I want to talk panspermia. I think it's time we got cosmic. What with this AI stuff coming down our heads. I would like to talk about AI a little and TikTok a little. What else are you going to talk about?
Well, that's plenty, because I have to cover these. There are other things that we can talk about. Perhaps some quantum physics like completely baseless, uninformed speculation on my part.
No such thing as too much of that. I had promised to explain why I tweeted a couple of weeks ago that I had changed my estimate of the probability of the lab leak hypothesis from above 50% to below 50%. I'm going to explain that.
You got a lot of grief for that.
I'm also going to explain why it's edging back toward 50%.
You got grief for that, because like Ron DeSantis, you're going with the way the crowd goes.
That's me. I'm a weather vane. No, I'll explain it all. And also,
I have a word for politicians like that, which I'll reveal in the Parrot Room.
Oh, boy.
It's a quantum physics word.
Oh, boy. Quantum physics word. Probability waves.
You'll if you think about it, you'll guess it, but don't think about it.
Wave particle dualities.
Close.
And then I'm going to defend myself against your charges that I have built an island of the dicks.
Okay.
That one hit close to home. And it's such a scurrilous allegation.
Okay. If you can show somebody who was on the island of dicks who has successfully escaped.
Escape from
that would be a powerful argument for your position.
Would be, wouldn't it? Okay. I'll think about that. Okay. Patreon.com/Parrot Room. And you can always, even if you don't want to go, or if you do, you can smash the like button right now on YouTube, if you're on YouTube. If not, you could rate and review the Nonzero podcast. And in any event, when in Princeton, eat at Hoagie Haven, and go Tigers.
Bula bula.
I think that's Yale classically, isn't it?
Is that? Oh, really? Well, the Tigers do this.
They do the fascist salute thing, yeah, kind of.
The wing thing.
That's not bad. Yeah, the wing. They touch their hearts with their wings.
There you go. The parrot is doing the Princeton salute.
Yep. Not Parrot. Not zany Parrot. That's what you get in the Parrot Room, folks. We'll see you there.